three scholars within the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. First of all, to my immediate right is Maulana Jahangir Saab, who's actually missionary in charge of our international French desk. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Faith Matters, Jahangir Saab. Next to Jahangir Saab is face well known, I'm sure, to MTA viewers as well. He's our missionary in charge from Ireland, former Sadr of Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya in the United Kingdom, Maulana Ibrahim Noonan Saab. Assalamu alaikum and welcome. And of course, another familiar face on Faith Matters, Dr. Zaid Khan Saab, who's chairman of the Qazar board here in the UK. Assalamu alaikum. Well, welcome, gentlemen, to Faith Matters. And there have been various allegations since the start of the community in terms of the blessed foundation which was laid by Hazrat Masih Maud Islam. And some would argue, and we've seen it over history, that anyone who comes to carry the message of God will always have allegations raised against them. And in this context, we have been receiving various questions, quite often actually rooted through some of our own members of the Jamaat, which have been raised with them from other non-Ahmadi friends. And the first, if I could move to them, comes from Dilawar Shah in Bradford. He actually asks that this relates to the actual books of Hazrat Masih Maud Islam. And he writes, and I'll quote the question, in one of his books, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad wrote the word Lanat repeatedly, 100 times, which is quite bizarre and shows what kind of person he was. What do you say to that? The books of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad are also available on Islam, and some have alleged that they've actually picked these kind of allegations up, actually from books that appear on the website. Jahangir Saab, if I could come to you in view of that question.
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. The reference is to the book Nur al-Haq, which means the light of truth, and this was published in 1894 by the Promised Messiah. The questioner got it slightly wrong. The word la'na, or curse, wasn't repeated 100 times. It was in actual fact repeated 1,000 times by the Promised Messiah. Now, for those who don't know much about the practices of Islam, it might seem bizarre, but in fact, if you go to the sources of Islam, and first of all to the Holy Quran, we will find that cursing people who are opponents of the truth and who absolutely refuse to accept the clear and argumentation given forward by the prophets of God, that they are cursed by not only the prophets, as we will see, but also by the angels and by God himself.
Before we go there, the actual definition of the word lana, just for our viewers who are not familiar with Arabic and Urdu, perhaps you could just briefly define it.
The definition of lana is understood to be losing the blessings of God. And if we lose the blessings of God, what do we have left? That in itself is a punishment. But it's only something which is invoked after all argumentation has been presented, and even in the face of blatant facts and truths, the opponents still refuse to acknowledge it, and they do it in a way which can hide the truth for others. So that's why they are cursed in this way. Now, we're going to come to why he did that in the book, but first of all I'd like to give the references in the Holy Quran, and we have two references in Surah Al-Imran, which is chapter 3 of the Holy Quran, as you know, and we have in verses 87 and 88, if you count Bismillah's first verse, otherwise it would be 86 and 87. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كيف يهدي الله قوما كفروا بعد إيمانهم وشهدوا أن الرسول حق وجاءهم البينات والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين, which means, how shall Allah guide a people who have disbelieved after believing and who had borne witness that the messenger was true and to whom clear proofs had come, and Allah guides not the wrongdoing people. أولئك جزاؤهم أن عليهم لعنة الله والملائكة والناس أجمعين. So of such the reward, this is Allah speaking, is that on them shall be the curse not only of Allah, but of the angels and of men altogether. Okay. So these people are accursed people because of the fact that they refuse the truth.
So it's based on the rejection of the truth, yes, in essence.
Exactly. Okay. And we have then the famous verse of the Mubahila, which is the prayer jewel. This is of course mentioned in the hadith as well, when the Holy Prophet Muhammad actually was presenting his arguments to Christians from Najran, and they debated it for a very long time. And even when that Christian group refused to accept the truth, even though they'd seen it, then he was told by God that now we are going to pray for the curse of God to fall upon the liar among the two. Otherwise, how will people know at the end of the day who is really true? That's really the ultimate course of action. And the verse is here from the same surah, but this is verse 62 or 61 if you don't count Bismillah's first verse. فَمَنْ حَاجَّكَ فِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُ أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ ثُمَّ نَبْتَهِلْ فَنَجْعَلْ لَعْنَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَاذِبِينَ. Now whoso disputes with thee concerning him, after what has come to thee of knowledge, say to him, come, let us call our sons and your sons and our women and your women and our people and your people, then let us pray fervently and invoke the curse of Allah on those who lie. Now the questioner has not mentioned why the promised Messiah had actually put 1,000 curses, had invoked 1,000 curses of God on somebody. In that book. Had he read the book and had presented those facts, it would have become clear why he'd done so. Actually, the book Nur al-Haq had been written in response to a highly inflammatory book called Tawzeen al-Aqwal, which was written by a certain Ahmaduddin, who was a Christian. And he was an ex-Muslim who'd converted to Christianity and had become a so-called missionary of theirs. And it was so abusive against the Holy Prophet Muhammad and Islam that even Hindu newspapers and even one Christian journal which is on record had said that it's highly inflammatory, and they went to the extent of saying that if there was going to be another uprising as the one which happened in India in 1857, this book would cause it. That's to tell you the extent of the...
To put this into context, this was very much the defense of Islam
and the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Yes, so very briefly, the Promised Messiah ﷺ told him to stop abusing the Holy Prophet ﷺ like this, and he said that you've criticized the style of the Holy Quran. He said no one can match that style. He said, but leave that aside, at least try to match my writings. You'll never be able to match the Quran, but at least try to compete with me. So he said, write a book in Arabic, as this book Nur al-Haq is written in Arabic, and if you can write better than me, then I'll give you 5,000 rupees as a reward. And he said, but he said they will not come forward. He said, I'm certain they will not come forward. He said, therefore, if they do not, and they do not stop this abuse, may 1,000 curses of God be upon them. And he wrote down 1,000 times the curse of God on them, Lana, Al-Lana. And he said, may the people of Islam say Ameen to every one of them, because of what they're doing against the Holy Prophet ﷺ and Islam. So he wrote that out of his love of the Prophet ﷺ and of Islam, and in defense of them.
And I think, Dr. Zahid Sahib, if I could come to you, this is an allegation which is often raised, and Jahangir Sahib just explained very eloquently in the classic way where opponents won't put the actual allegation into context. And linked to this is this allegation which is sometimes raised against Hazrat Masih Maud about the use of dirty language against those who did not accept him. Perhaps you can expound upon that a bit more in the context of what we've just heard.
Exactly in the same manner, the Promised Messiah in his writings obviously has brought to attention that I have been sent by God, and this is my message to you. And after everything has become clear and they have no arguments left against the truth of the Promised Messiah, and they have no way to disbelieve him or discredit him, he has invited them to Islam. But they have all shied away from that and turned to misguided allegations against that. And in that sense, the Promised Messiah again has reminded them that they are going to be the recipients of the wrath of Allah if they continue in that sense. And this is exactly what has happened in the case of all the prophets of Allah that have come before, that because of their rejection, it is as a result of that they become the recipient and the target of the wrath of Allah, and that is what Prophet Messiah has reminded them about.
Jazakallah, gentlemen, for